On today's episode of Locked On 76ers, Paul Reed. We've been waiting to figure out what's going to happen. Well, the offer sheet was presented by the Utah Jazz. The Sixers had the right to match by Sunday night, and they did it. Are you surprised? Was this the right move? Well, we'll discuss it next right here. Locked On 76ers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome. You are Locked On 76ers. I'm Devon Givens from 97.5 The Fanatic Radio here in Philadelphia, alongside my co-hosts and partners, always from the Inquirer and theinquirer.com. He is Keith Pompey. We thank you for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and right here on YouTube, and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Keith, what's happening, man?
What's good, bro? How you been, man?
Not much, man. How was your weekend?
It was pretty good. It was cool.
We had a lot of rain this weekend, huh?
I know. Yeah, good for the grass.
No question. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me like it bothers a lot of people. So as long as it doesn't flood anywhere and knock people's power out, I'm all good. But glad you had a good weekend. Hope everybody out there had a good weekend. Also, we want to get into Paul Reed. He is back. No worries, folks. You didn't lose all of your free agents. And for a lot of people, the most important free agent for the offseason in terms of bringing back, outside of the James Harden piece. Of course, I'm speaking of the other four free agents coming into the start of free agency for the 76ers. Paul Reed is back. We'll get into that. Secondly, what does it mean for all of the big men now on the roster? After Embiid, 3 for sure. How do they fit in overall? What does this mean for all of them? Could this be setting something up for later? And finally, we'll talk about the debut. Speaking of big men, the number 1 overall pick for this year's NBA draft from the San Antonio Spurs, Victor Wembanyama. A little bit of an up and down debut for the big man. We'll get into him later on here on Locked On 76ers. But Keith, let's start with Paul Reed. With Paul Reed, he had signed a 3-year, $23 to $24 million offer sheet with the Utah Jazz over the weekend. And with it, the Sixers had the right to match by late Sunday night. They did so right around 10:30, before hitting the 11 o'clock mark. On the clock, man, Eastern Standard Time. And when it first dropped, I'm like, there's no way Daryl Morey is going to match this. And, well, he did. I didn't think he would. I thought, of course, that it was set up a certain way to make it difficult for the 76ers to do so. And honestly, I was a little surprised that Daryl Morey did it.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, but not because of nothing against Paul Reed. I think that they always wanted to keep him. I just felt like the stipulations in the contract, or the way the contract is 3 years, $23 million. You know, it's going to eat up the salary cap, a lot of the luxury tax. Like, for instance, you know, if Paul Reed right now, you know, the luxury tax is what threshold is 155.2 million, right? And the Sixers will incur an additional 14 million hit in luxury tax penalties by matching it, right? So right now they're at 171 million, right? Now, when you look at it, the way they had it set up is Paul Reed has veto power on his contract for the first year. And if the Sixers make it to the second round of this year's playoffs, the following 2 seasons are guaranteed at 15.7 mil. So when you hear that, you to the point you're saying to yourself, like
15.7 mil in total over the
in
next
total,
2 years.
Yeah, for the next 2 years. So when you hear stuff like that, you know, it's kind of sort of like they can't match that. Even what they said, you can't match that. But hey, they kept saying like they were going to do it, and they did it. But I also feel like they had to do it, D. I do. Like, I feel like when you base off of social media and the outcry of the fans, it was one of those things where everyone was saying, Y'all better match it. Y'all better match it. They looked at Paul. They looked at all the other guys who the Sixers said they were going to bring back or they intended to bring back, went on to other teams and got huge paydays. And I feel like it was one of those things where, Paul Reed benefited from the disdain that the fans had. Now, I know you're not supposed to do stuff for the fans, but at the same time, the fans were livid and they were upset and they wanted Paul Reed to come back. And I felt like he benefited from that, man. I do, because of everybody else who left. And I felt like if he would have left, it would have been a lot of fans like, I'm done with Daryl Morey. I'm done with the Sixers. Like, you guys just keep letting this talent walk for what? So you can save money. Do you want to save money or do you want to win a championship? And I feel like Paul Reed benefited from that.
Well, I mean, you might be right. The fact that, yeah, that he is back and the number is so weird with the language. And look, the Sixers have made the second round five of the last 6 seasons in the postseason. So there's a good chance that they could do that again. I mean, you're still looking at the same starting five. You still do have your six man and your first big off the bench in Paul Reed, six man and DeAnthony Melton. And you just added a few more pieces that are still talented. They're just taking over for a couple of guys that, as you mentioned, the intent was there to bring them back. And there were some that the fan base maybe wanted back. But overall, I just thought it was an interesting way for the contract to be done. The fact that you mentioned all the salary cap implications are very, very important here because of the fact that they are now into the luxury tax. Unless they make some movement off of someone else, Keith, they still have two open roster spots. You can still sign up. They still have room for a veteran minimum. The mid-level exception hasn't been touched yet. So I'm very curious to see how this impacts the rest of the offseason. And certainly if, in fact, something does happen in terms of trades with maybe someone in the starting five or someone off the bench like Furkan Korkmaz with his $5+ million to see where it goes. But yeah, Paul Reed has nothing to do with the players, more about the money. I really didn't think he would get something close to this kind of number. Not to say he's not good enough, just wasn't sure if they would go into that number if we're looking at it on annual value terms, just looking at $8 million per season. Was Paul Reed going to get that? I wasn't quite sure, honestly. But here we are. And we talked about it before, where you saw someone like Jock Landale. The Suns had him under contract as a qualifying offer and a free agent. And then at the last minute, they renounced his rights and they let him leave. And when he left, he went to the Houston Rockets, signed a 4-year, $32 million extension, with the first year being guaranteed at $8 million. Years 2, 3, and 4, there are some things in there language-wise that doesn't guarantee those 3 years. So going off of that, going off of Drew Eubanks, where you see some numbers out there and a few other backup big men around the league, this was because of what Paul Reed has been for the last 2 seasons, and specifically in the postseason as the primary backup to Joel Embiid. This was probably based on some of those numbers that we saw from those other players around the league with their respective teams. So I guess we shouldn't be all that shocked there, but the language, yeah, and how the numbers break down from year 1 through 3, somewhat surprising overall. But good for Paul Reed. Good for Paul Reed. We talk about making changes and where there don't necessarily need to be changes, and it's good to see a guy come back, comfortability with the city, the organization, his teammates. Now he has to just go out there and make sure he performs under his new head coach, where he still gets that nod as potentially the first big off the bench. And is there some versatility where we see him also at the 4-man and not just the 5? So good for Paul Reed. Good for the Sixers. They keep their 7 guys intact, and we'll get into next with the other 3 big men, or just these 3 big men in general coming off the bench, what this means. Heck, we said 7, 8 intact, including Montrezl Harrell. We'll see what his role is, Mo Bamba, Paul Reed, all of it next, right here on Locked On 76ers. And as we sit here right now, we are in the dead of summer, and it's hot. You're dealing with all the heat, but you're also having a good time and running out there, spending time with family and friends, and maybe some barbecues, some cookouts and all. And you're getting together and you're getting some food. You're picking up some burgers, hot dogs for a summer cookout get together. You know you're already doing it, so why not get some cash back with it from Ibotta? It's officially summer, and a new season means new clothes, new food, right? All in there. Kids are at home maybe a little bit longer. They're eating up all the food as you have them in the house. Well, take advantage of again from Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year. You know, you could use that, right? I know I could. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. Or you could use your cash back to buy that flight that you've been eyeing maybe sometime next month before the summer ends, or that game you're dying to attend, or fancy dinner you've been craving. Whatever it is, other apps, they give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out at your bank account, PayPal, or even gift cards. You earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's for some things you might want to address around the home. Macy's, again, that item, that clothing that you may have been eyeing, and also Sephora that you may want to buy for one of your loved ones for maybe a birthday or such. Best Buy, that new television, whatever it is, much, much more is there. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying, Ibotta using the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKED. Thanks for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow on the show. Well, the Summer Sixers keep us busy. So we'll talk about the team overall, maybe get into some more Summer League action as they have shifted from Salt Lake City to Las Vegas, and check in on the Summer Sixers. We'll do that tomorrow right here on Locked On 76ers. Well, Keith, behind the MVP, Joel Embiid, at the 5 spot, you have 3 big men for sure. Don't all have to play the 5, but we have seen them play the 5. We can get into what this now means for the 76ers and the big men overall. Paul Reed, Mo Bamba, Montrezl Harrell, and maybe the young guy that we've talked about in the past, Philippe Petrusev. Now, we have to check on
Petrusev is all good.
the pronunciation of his name, Petrusev. 3, potentially 4 big men behind Joel Embiid. I mean, yes, you want some big man depth. It's not out of the ordinary to have 3 big men behind your starting 5. But what does this mean for these guys, Keith, behind Joel Embiid?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a logjam, right? But you look at it last year. They did have 4 centers last year. They had 4 centers last year. At the end of the season, you had Dwayne Dedmon, you had Paul Reed, and you had Montrez. I feel like you look at Montrez or Paul Reed, one of the two. I think more so Montrez can kind of sort of slide over to be a utility 4 for him. You know what I mean? Like a utility guy. I don't expect him to get a lot of burn. I don't, but I expect him to come in and be a situational guy to get in. Now, Petrusev, that's the one that might be in trouble, because when you look at it, it could be, hey, you got 3 options. Hey, bro, we might be able to sign you to a 2-way, right? I mean, but in order to do that, they'll probably have to release one of the guys who they have to a 2-way and maybe convert them to a standard NBA contract, one of their wings, right? Guards and wings. Or you could do with Petrusev, you can stash him again, or you can just waive him. Hey, come to report to training camp. We'll see what happens, see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, we'll just waive you. And they'll look at it as if like he was a 2nd round pick. I believe he was taken number 52. And you'll say, we unfortunately, it just didn't work out. We had him for 2 years overseas, and we felt like he didn't develop the way that we thought. You know what I mean? So that could be an option. But I look at it as one of the things. Is it an ideal situation? No, it's not. You even with 4 centers, you got one too many for a position that only one person is basically on the floor at the same time. So you're going to have some type of flexibility. But at the same time, you look at this, somebody, not Paul Reed, and maybe Montrez for the most part, could be, if they do make a trade, he could be going with James Harden. I mean, with Harden on his way out. So there are some options.
Yeah, look, and like you mentioned, it's not something that we haven't seen before with 4 big men on the roster overall. You're just going to sit there and rot. He's just going to be there. You're not going to play much. So that's where the Petrosev piece comes in here with him, of the uncertainty of where he could be. And as you just mentioned, the possibilities of maybe one of these players being involved in some sort of deal if they have to go in that direction overall, because you're looking at the overall roster, 15 that you would have. Of course, you can carry 17 plus 2-way players. You can have 3 2-way players this season, but it's just a guy that's going to be sitting there in the uniform on the end of the bench in that case. So not uncommon. It's not something that's out of the ordinary, but we know Joel Embiid also plays 35 plus minutes a night. And unless it's a situational thing where we're looking at it, not necessarily Swiss Army knife type of big men, Mo Bamba he's the only one that could really step out away from the basket and shoot the basketball. With Reed and Montrezl Harrell, more interior players. And we know Montrezl Harrell can get his own shot, where Paul Reed has to rely on others to really help him get his. But for the most part, they have 3 different types of backups behind Joel Embiid, where Nick Nurse will have to figure that part out. But I'm sure they discussed all of this, especially with the roster spots going with 3 big men behind them and potentially a 4th. So we'll see how it all plays out over the offseason. But Paul Reed, in fact, back as a 76er. Keith, in the final segment, man, let's talk about another big man who's making waves, of course, as the number 1 overall pick, Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs, making his debut over the weekend. Some ups and some downs. That's not unusual for a rookie in the NBA, and it's only summer league, so you know it's going to be tough when things get started during the regular season. And also an in-season tournament. It's here. Who asked for this? Let's talk about it next. Final segment, Locked On 76ers. Welcome back. Locked On 76ers. Keith Pompey, Devon Givens here with you. And Keith, let's start with Victor Wembanyama, man. Debut, not so great. Not so great first time out for Victor Wembanyama. Under 10 points. I believe he finished with 8 points, 9 rebounds in his debut. He was dunked on and he was dropped to the floor as they played the Charlotte Hornets. And I think it was Kai Jones got him on the dunk. Brandon Miller, the number 2 overall pick behind Victor Wembanyama, he dropped him on a move that made him lose his balance and dropped him to his seat on the floor. It was a really nice play, and he also got chopped in the face. He didn't understand what happened, and he was just being made a joke of as he played on Friday night in his debut. And then I'll top it off, the whole Britney Spears piece of it had Britney Spears fans coming after him, and everybody was making jokes. But then he bounced back, Keith. He had a big game on Sunday night in his second time out, as he played much, much better for the San Antonio Spurs. What did you make of his first weekend of NBA basketball, albeit summer league?
I was impressed by what he did in the second game. Not by,
Yep.
Yeah, because that shows you why they drafted him. And what I mean by that is he has a bad game. You're allowed to have a bad game, right? And especially when you're the guy and everybody's coming at you. Like, you know what I mean? You got some of these dudes, they want to poster him, they want to embarrass him, they want to do whatever. He was the first overall pick. How come I wasn't the first pick? Or I'm a dunk on him to make a name for myself. But typically the heart and the fire and all that other stuff was shown in that second game because he didn't hide. He came back and he did what he was supposed to do. Now, when you look at this guy, he is a unicorn. And the thing is, yes, he did shoot the ball poorly at times. He was getting moved off the block. But the one thing that stood out to me in the first game and impressed me in the first game was his dribbling and his basketball IQ and the way that he was finding teammates. When we look at that, he's going to go there where Greg Popovich, not the greatest coach, but the winningest coach of all time, who's going to get him in situations. We'll see him being utilized like Kevin Durant. Now, for people who think that when Kevin Durant first came here, they forget that this guy could barely bench 135 pounds, right? So I feel like we got to give this guy time. Yes, he did look bad that first game. He showed improvement the second one, but I think we got to give him time, and you got to realize that the Spurs are going to put him in a great situation and have people on the floor with him that's going to be able to do the dirty work that he's is having to do now in the summer league. So I feel like he'll be fine.
I think so too. I agree with you that the bounce back in game number 2 was important for him. I mean, it wasn't something that was going to define his entire summer, and certainly not his NBA career. But it was important for him to come back. He said he didn't. He said in his comments after game 1, I didn't really know what I was doing out there, and I was surprised. Well, he seems like a very honest person. I was surprised that he said that, and I'm sure the PR team was like, don't say that. But in any event, the number one pick, you're always going to have the target on you. They're going to come after you. They're going to come after you, and they're going to come after you in waves. And they're going to try to put you on the poster. And you're a 7'4", 7'5" man, big man. You're going to try to block shots, and sometimes you're going to miss where they got to dunk on you. That's just part of being a big man or a defender in general that is not afraid to challenge people. And with him and all the fanfare, everybody seeing him play against the G League team Ignite, seeing his highlights from overseas, yeah, everybody wants to see it. That's why they were lining up at 3 a.m. from late Friday night into late Thursday night into early Friday morning to see him for the first time. But it was important for him, though, to have it that way, play out that way, where he did have a very good game in game number 2. There's still a lot of things I want to see from him. But look, we're talking about a rookie coming in where he's not a finished product. So it was good to see him bounce back. I'm very intrigued to watch him this season, and I will pay attention to what he's doing for the rest of the summer league for however many games he plays, just to kind of get a glimpse of who this player is, the type of impact he has. He had a crazy offensive rebound putback dunk that I thought he didn't even bring the ball down, which I loved. Kept the ball high, similar to what we want to see Joel Embiid do sometimes, and not bring the ball down, making himself smaller and have players swiping at the basketball and cutting it loose. But overall, good for Victor Wembanyama, and some good talent in the summer league, right, man?
Yeah, it is. It's some good talent in summer league. But you know what? One thing not to go off subject a little bit, this summer league is scary to me, man. Like I'm looking at these injuries and stuff like that, and I'm like, yo, is it really wise to be playing in this? I mean, because I get it. I understand what summer league is about, but this year, particularly, you got Scoot Henderson. You have one of the twins that what's their last name? But you know what I'm talking about.
Thompson.
Yeah, the Thompson twins. One of them got injured. Then you seeing other people, and like every time Wembley would grab a rebound in the first game, looked like he's about to twist his ankle. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, I know basketball is basketball, but I don't know. It just seems kind of
Well, I don't think they'll play every game, so
yeah, they're not. But
if
it's just
that'll make it easier for you.
huh?
I said maybe that'll make it easier for you. They won't play every game.
Well, yeah, it's they won't make it every game, but the problem is with the summer league, it's kind of like, um, I don't know. It's like I like it, and I like
I
what
get
it,
it.
what it is, but it's
Why risk
going to
them
be something
into
different.
injury?
Yeah, why? I mean, why risk something? I mean, especially with you got certain dudes who ain't gonna make the roster, and some of them trying to like go out there and prove themselves. And I don't know. I to me, it's just kind of
Well,
scary.
to get a glimpse of who they are a little bit, give them some run against some of the other talent that they were just drafted with in the class, or even last year's class, or if they're playing their third year, starting their third year, but they need some runs from their team. That's where I see it. And in the end, for me, Keith, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, but for me, it's basketball. It can happen anytime. Like you said, it looked like he was going to twist his ankle every time he came down for a rebound. That's just because of his frame and nothing else, just because he's so thin. So basketball is basketball. Injuries can happen at any time. But I do agree with you in the sense that since it is some league and we've seen this pattern before, there's no doubt load management for these top rookies when it comes to, and even the second year players, where you talked about Isaiah Joe last year, right, Keith, playing really
Mm-hmm.
well, but he also got shut down at some point because he was playing so well. So the same thing will probably happen with these top players as their high draft picks. They will be shut down by their teams. Give them a little bit, don't give them a lot. See you in training camp. And these guys are always working out all summer. So give them a little bit of a break where you're not taxing them too much. All right. Final one, man, before we step away. The in-season tournament was announced. And Keith, you explain it. I don't like it. I didn't ask for this. Yes, I am a guy who is a traditionalist when it comes to the NBA or sports in general, but I don't mind change. This in-season tournament, I got used to the play-in tournament that has worked out. It has been entertaining. But this in-season tournament that ends up in Las Vegas at some point during the season for the final four teams for the right to win the in-season crown. All right, man. Explain this in-season tournament and the pool that the 76ers are in with four other teams.
Yeah, the in-season tournament. What's going to happen is they're going to play these games on Tuesdays and Thursdays, beginning, I believe, is what, November the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sixers, and so they'll play the games on Tuesdays and Thursdays on November the 3rd. Um, and it will culminate in Las Vegas in early December. The semifinals are scheduled for December the 7th, and the championship game is set 2 days later. So what's going to happen is it's going to be a home and home up until like the semifinals. And what they'll start off with pool play, right? And it will be a 2-month tournament. So what they'll have is they'll have um, a group play and knockout rounds, which is similar to like soccer's World Cup competition, right? So now in the Sixers group play, it will be the 76ers, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Hawks, the Pacers, and the Pistons. So let's just say the Sixers are heavily favored. And the reason why they do that, they're actually going to be six groups. Like all 30 teams were randomly drawn into six groups of five within their conference based on last season's win-loss records.
Mm-hmm.
So the Sixers were the third best team in the league. So they're in Group A in the East Group A.
It's,
So
it's it's one that favors them if you look at it from based on team wise and what we've seen last season.
yeah, because the Sixers last year, you look at it, the Sixers finished 54-28 last season, with the conference's third best record. The Cavs were 51-31. Are the only other pool team coming off a winning season. The
Mm-hmm.
Hawks were 44-44, while the Pacers finished 35-47. The Pistons had the league's worst record at 17-65, right? So now, D, this is what happened. In group play, each team will play four designated group games. It will be one against each group opponent with 2 games at home and 2 on the road, right? The games will be played every Tuesday and Tuesday and Friday, I'm sorry, from November 3rd to November the 28th on what will be called tournament nights. The winners of the 6 groups and 2 wildcard teams will advance to the single elimination knockout round, right? So that's where the quarterfinals will be played on the teams market, the number one teams market or the favorite teams market on December the 4th and December the 5th before the tournament heads to Vegas for the Final Four. I don't like it, D. I don't like it at all. Like you said it too. To me, is I don't like it, but I'm willing to give it a chance if that makes sense. Because I didn't like how they changed certain formats in the All Star game. I didn't like other things that they did. I didn't like the play in tournament. It seems to me everything is geared towards television now. Like, we got to they're paying all this money. We got to get this viewership up. Um, and the biggest question mark that I have, D, is okay, so are you going to be able? You're not going to be, because all these games are going to count towards the
Regular season.
82 game standing, all besides the final,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the teams who make it to the finals are essentially playing an 83 game schedule, but that one game is the finals going to be an exhibition game. So does that mean like it's going to be a little break or something, or you're going to, or what you're going to do at the back end of the season, you're going to have to basically redo the schedule? Because there are going to be certain teams that are going to be missing several games. So how are you going to work that out? So
Yeah,
like,
because you're talking about normally we get our 82 game schedule. That's the schedule. Now you
yeah,
got to mix in this play-in tournament, and as you mix in the play-in tournament, you're right. If you advance to the finals in December, that's not necessarily part of the schedule.
it's not because none of that is, none of
Right.
it is, none of it is. So it's like, what are we going to do? Are we just going to get the 2 month schedule, or we get like through January? I mean, it's going to be crazy, because there are going to be certain teams that are like, wow, while this is going on, I can't, again, it's Tuesday and whatever, right? I get that, but there are going to be certain games that are going to have to be made up. It's going to have to be made up. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. The NBA used to be sacred to me, and now it's kind of like, I don't.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. Adam
It's
Silver is, interested in the European things of soccer, where they've, implemented some of the things from what he's seen in soccer, bringing that to basketball over here in the States. And again, I don't mind change with certain things, but again, this one wasn't really necessary. We didn't ask for this, so I they made a big production about it. They announced it in Las Vegas. They had some of the players who were there on stage to unveil the tournament cup and whatever. It was called a cup, and of course, this comes from a lot of stuff that we see it in the European sports, where they have cups as their trophies. And whatever, we're gonna have to get used to it. We're gonna have to deal with it, and not the biggest fan of it. Not the biggest fan. Now,
yeah.
could be swayed based on how it plays out, how the fan involvement goes, the fact that these guys play so hard against one another, and also the winner, each player from the team, each winner gets what, $100,000 if they win.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great incentive.
No. If they win,
If they win, they
you
get
get 500,000 each.
500,000. They get split it amongst the players or something.
Nah, they all get 500,000.
Oh, 500,000. I missed that
Yeah.
part. All right, I guess I didn't care enough about it to read that
Well,
far.
that's how it goes. The players on the winning team, the winning championship, gets $500,000 apiece. The
That's good. That's
losing
good for
team,
the young players.
yeah, that's good. The losing team in the championship get 200,000. The teams that lose in the semifinals get 100,000. The teams that lose in the quarterfinals get 50,000.
Well, I guess in terms of the young players and all, the ones who don't make big money, that's a nice thing for them. That's something that they would have to do anyway, because again, these players didn't ask for it. And then you got to break and go to Las Vegas for the championship. Look, they travel all year round or all season long, but this is something totally off, and it's what it is. It's what they do. They change things and they try to juice up the sport even more. But in this particular case, I didn't think it was necessary. All right, man, that'll do it for us here on Locked On 76ers. We thank you for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow on the show. We'll tell you what Mo Bamba and Patrick Beverley had to say as they will be introduced as the newest members of the Philadelphia 76ers. Keith, do you mind letting the good folks know where they can find us?
Yeah, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts at. It's free and available. You can also follow us on our YouTube channel, Locked On 76ers YouTube. But when you do that, make sure you click on the Liberty Bell. That makes you allows you to become a new subscriber. And secondly, you'll get notifications when we have our podcast. And make sure you follow my man D on Twitter at DevonG975. Follow him tonight on the Divine Giving Show from 6 to 10 p.m. Also follow me on Twitter at Pompey on Sixers, and you can read my articles in Inquire.com, Inquire with an I, Inquire.com, and by purchasing a Philadelphia Inquirer.
Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching. Keith, talk to you tomorrow, man.
All right, bro. Peace.
All right.